Welcome to True Crime 101 with Murder Friends, the podcast where three friends from three different countries talk about murder. My name's Alanna, and I'm Canadian.
I'm Anna, and I'm American.
My name's Hannah, and I'm British.
In addition to our longer episodes, True Crime 101 talks you through key true crime cases and theories. So this week, I thought we would talk about a serial killer, unfortunately. And at least for me, when I think of serial killers, I don't think of 2019. I think of sepia-toned 1970s. Everyone's got bell bottoms on and nobody locks their front door kind of thing.
Yeah.
So recently, Canada has been dealing with its own serial killer. And while I don't really think we need to know too much about him because he is like a garbage bag of a human being, I think what is really important maybe to discuss and to think about and what have you is why he got away with it for so long. So I'm not sure how widespread the news has gotten, especially in the UK, it being like a Canadian crime. But we're going to be covering Bruce McArthur. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about him. He's awful, obviously.
I've never actually heard of him.
You might recognize him once we start going because he was in the news for a particular reason, which is also gross. Anyway, So McArthur preyed on the Toronto gay community for nearly a decade.
This
is the one. Mm-hmm. And only recently has he been arrested and convicted. He was actually just sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences, and he will not be eligible for parole until he is 91. 91 seems like a really long time, but he is 67. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, not that long. We're talking about an old man here.
I didn't realize he was so old.
No, me neither.
Yeah, it's so creepy. And what's not interesting, but notable in this is that we're talking about murders within the last decade. It's not like the Golden State Killer situation where we have a suspect that's been arrested and he's quite old, but they're crimes that happened like in the 60s and 70s. With McArthur, he has just recently been arrested and convicted for crimes that he's done in the last 10 years. So it's like a very recent serial killer.
Wow, so he's old, but like it's not just a young person, which you stereotypically think
did them when
younger.
He was old, yeah.
Yeah.
So McArthur, 67, actually pleaded guilty to the first-degree murders of 8 men with names that I don't know how to pronounce, so we're going to put them on our website. What he particularly focused on, and we'll get into it in a little bit, is that he went for very vulnerable people, and that was sort of his MO in a way. McArthur was actually a married father of 2, but left his wife in the 1990s and moved from Oshawa to Toronto. So like they're both in Ontario. I don't remember how many hours. We're talking hours away from each other, but Toronto obviously being the capital of Ontario, a big like thriving city, if you can. That's a thriving city is like an awful way of saying that. I'm so sorry for saying thriving city. What's creepy about McArthur, other than the fact that he is awful, like we were saying, he's old and he was so convincingly harmless looking that he actually used to play Santa in like the shopping malls.
Oh,
right?
That always creeps me out.
It does, yeah.
It's so creepy.
Aren't they usually like alcoholics anyway? Like you just see them in the back and they're Santa, like their beards down, and they're all like, that's what they're like in the movies just anyway.
Puffing a fag, yeah.
Yeah.
So with his age, as well as with his, quote, unthreatening appearance, so he was quite, they quote him as having round features and a broad, cheery smile, made him seem really approachable with children and, of course, with the parents of the children. Like he just seemed, like a mall Santa, like a happy, unassuming old guy. So his victims disappeared between 2010 and 2017. Most of them were Middle Eastern or South Asian descent. Several had struggled with addiction issues or homelessness. Most had frequented the Toronto's gay village, but several of them were not openly gay. So for people who don't know, Toronto's gay village is not like a street. It's like a huge section of Toronto. It's, village. It really is like its own town. It's a really large section. So he specifically went for people who had some sort of vulnerability, but a lot of them, the sort of overarching theme is that many of the men that he preyed upon hadn't told their families that they were gay or bisexual. So them meeting up with McArthur was a secret. So people didn't know where they were going or who they were meeting up with or that kind of thing. So it was hard to sort of piece that stuff together. So McArthur was arrested in January of 2018. He was initially accused of killing 6 men, and this is where you might have heard him in the news because he was apparently burying their remains in large flower planters at the home of a client where he stored tools for his landscaping business. So they started, nightmare fuel, uncovering bodies and like decomposed remains in these flower planters. And I remember reading that headline. That was the first time I had ever heard of him, was like, this guy's burying people in flower planters. Like, how have we not heard of him before this? Like, so originally that was 6 men. However, they found more remains in a ravine behind the house itself. So although McArthur did plead guilty and the judge recognized the guilty plea, he said it was highly unlikely that McArthur will ever be released on parole. He was quoted as saying, "Although McArthur has taken responsibility of his actions, there is no evidence of remorse." And there is a lot of evidence. So I guess he sort of assumed, like, I'm going to be convicted anyway, we might as well just do this. But he doesn't show any sort of sign, at least from these reports, that he is remorseful in any way for what he's done. It's basically like, I know I've been caught. After passing the sentence, the judge described his behavior as pure evil and said he would have kept killing if he had not been caught. And so, like we were saying before, McArthur targeted men that were dealing with some sort of issue and oftentimes living in the margins of Canadian society. So when they started disappearing, it attracted very little attention. Kind of like in the 1970s, you know, the serial killers that maybe preyed on sex workers. And that never really got attention that it should have. It's a similar situation, except it's happening between 2010 and 2017, which is disgusting. All of the victims of McArthur were vulnerable, and they were specifically chosen because of their vulnerabilities. So whether it was issues with their immigration or their immigration concerns, whether it was mental health issues, or the idea that they were sort of leading a secret double life as they were not openly gay or bisexual, especially to their families or their wives or partners and that sort of stuff. Now, at the trial, the evidence was so disturbing that the prosecutor took the unusual step of actually warning the court that attending this trial could affect their mental health. And there are details. Let's not go into all the details, but this is like a warning that's it's not nice. So the evidence that they found most of it was at his house, I believe. He was good at hiding his tracks, but he kept a lot of things from people, which, what a fucking idiot. So the evidence included that McArthur strangled and dismembered his victims. So we know that he put some people in the flower planters, right, to get rid of some of the evidence. He also took pictures of many of the victims after death, like posed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just like, what a fucking maniac. Anyway, et cetera, gross stuff. He also kept some of their hair in Ziploc bags that he kept in one of his properties. Just, yeah, awful. Now, the big break came when McArthur killed Andrew Kinsman. Now, thank God, Kinsman had an entry in his diary marked Bruce on the 26th of June, 2017, the day he disappeared. So they were finally able to put a name to where he was going. They found video surveillance showing Andrew getting into a car that was then traced back to McArthur. Now, McArthur's arrest was actually spurred on because they were concerned that he had taken another victim. So this could be potentially victim 9. So they trace Andrew and McArthur together on the day that Andrew disappeared. So the police had put surveillance on McArthur's house, and they weren't quite ready yet to arrest him, but they wanted to just keep an eye on him because obviously they think that he might be the cause of Andrew's disappearance. Now, there was an individual, a married man identified only as John in court, fit the profile of many of McArthur's previous victims. He had arrived in Canada 5 years prior from the Middle East, and his family did not know he was gay. There was text between this John and McArthur revealing that the two had met on a gay dating app and had discussed keeping their affair secret. So we know that his family and friends were unaware that there was some sort of connection with Bruce. And Bruce was very adamant about keeping the relationship secret, obviously for his own benefit. In January 2019, John went back to McArthur's apartment. Now, thankfully, the apartment was still under surveillance, and the police had been instructed that if McArthur returned with anyone, he had to be arrested because there was little doubt that that person would be leaving that apartment afterwards. Now, a couple of the reports say that McArthur had told John he wanted to try something different and handcuffed him to his bed and tried to suffocate him with a bag over his head. Now, the articles say that it was in this moment the police knocked down the door. I don't know how close it was, but they do make it sound like McArthur was literally in the act of trying to kill John, that the police bust down the door and save him and arrest McArthur.
I think that's what I remember about this case. I remember the planters. I think this article, like you might have shared this article, somebody did between us. And I remember when they
discussed it.
Yeah, we discussed it. And then like the police managed to basically catch him with somebody as well.
Yeah, how crazy.
That's like a movie. That's what happens in a movie. They manage to like save the last victim or something. Wild.
During the investigation, police uncovered a USB device containing 9 folders with several of the 8 victims' name. The final folder was named John, obviously not his alias, his real name. It contained photos of John that were downloaded the same day that McArthur had murdered Andrew. So it's likely he murdered Andrew and then went right back online to find someone new, found this John, downloaded his pictures and put it into a little folder on his computer. And other folders on that computer were associated with other murder victims. So he was keeping like a really disgusting, collection of their pictures and stuff. Now, the Crown had successfully requested that McArthur's previous conviction for an assault in 2003 be included in the sentencing consideration. He had a few run-ins with the police prior, so it did help show that he was basically consistently violent. These were actual, like, assaults, so they could at least show, like, this man is dangerous and it needs to be taken into consideration. Now, McCarthy's attorney agreed that the crimes warranted the most serious consequences, but he argued that even a lack of even a faint hope of parole for nearly half a century was unnecessarily harsh, and given McArthur's age and the fact that he pleaded guilty, that should be taken into consideration. And when I was researching this and thinking, like, this guy is nearly 70, which is like my dad's age. And I just can't imagine, like, finding out this is your dad and then having people plead, like, oh, well, he's old, we should take mercy on him. It's like, what the fuck?
No.
Yeah, but also, like, he didn't have any mercy on the, all the victims he killed and dismembered. Like, why show him it?
Exactly. Why should, we give him mercy? He
was still, like, actively doing it at that age. So it's not like he did it 30 years previously, stopped, and then, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of talked about that at the beginning. It's kind of like, he's still active. Like, they literally caught him red-handed. Yeah. So it's unlikely he would stop until he could physically not do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. McArthur's sentencing was also tempered by revelations in court that the police had actually missed an opportunity to detain him in 2016. So he was accused of attempting to strangle a man in his van, which potentially could have been an additional victim, was interrupted, but then McArthur was released without charge. So people were saying, like, you could have had this guy earlier. However, of course, police dismissed the suggestion that they could have acted sooner, saying, you know, we have the luxury of hindsight right now. We didn't know at the time.
Yeah, but I still think that if you try and strangle someone, there should be some sort of punishment. I don't think you should just be let go for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the big things, and one of the things that I think is most important in this whole sort of thing, is the relationship between the police and vulnerable communities like the LGBTQ+. That's a mouthful. So the police are basically acknowledging that they have to work to rebuild trust, quote unquote, with the city's LGBTQ+ community, and pledge to cooperate with an inquiry into how police handle missing persons cases. They basically say our work is not done. However, the gay community in Toronto was rightfully shocked and furious when the details of Bruce came out. From 2010 to 2017, gay men had been disappearing in alarming numbers from the gay village, and many people had actually suspected a serial killer for quite a while. But they were either treated as missing person cases or they weren't investigated at all. So one of the reports said that long simmering tensions with the police in Toronto boiled over. They wanted to know why their fears hadn't been taken more seriously. Some argued that the police were too slow to warn the community of a possible serial killer, saying lives could have been saved. To make matters worse, the police sort of appeared to put some blame on the gay community for the killings because that is a good idea.
That's going to help the situation.
The police chief, Mark Sanders, told reporters that they might have caught McArthur sooner had residents of the gay village been more forthcoming. We knew that people were missing and we knew we didn't have the right answers, but nobody was coming to us with anything. So I think it just sort of shows, like, there's a long-standing issue between this community and the police. The police are actually banned from the Gay Pride Parade in Toronto because of all this kind of stuff. Like, they are not allowed to be participants in the Gay Pride Parade, which is one of the largest in the world, I think, is in Toronto. So in a move that some people might consider, I don't know, acknowledgement of their neglect of the gay community, the police announced that they were reopening 25 cold cases, all murders associating with Toronto's gay village. Some of these are as old as 1975 and just have been sat there, basically. So, I mean, as far as we know, 8 people have died as part of Toronto's gay village. We have a name associated with that. Had he done more that we don't know about? Potentially. The fact that there are 25 cold cases in Toronto's gay village alone suggests that there could be more. But it definitely has got people talking more about police relationships and this particular gay community. But I mean, you could stretch it to any community, really, in any country or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's really important to highlight the tensions between the police and the LGBTQ+ community, but also the black and minority ethnic community as well.
Yeah.
And especially when those two communities are mixed, it adds like another layer of just utter shit police work.
Yeah.
Because of who these people are. And you expect, I mean, us as 3 white women, you know, you kind of expect the police to like always do their best and everything like that, but this is not the case. And it's just it's so shocking. And so upsetting.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to the fact, like, this is not one of those old stories we listen to on a podcast, like the Golden State Killer, and they're like, oh, well, things are different now because of this case we've learned, and these policies have changed and whatnot. It's like, this, like, literally just happened in Canada, which, like, I'd like to think is a very progressive country, and we still fucked up.
And I wonder if he does have more victims, because you feel like people... I have no idea. I have nothing to back this up with. But usually you'll find these like a serial killer will show signs of early crimes. They don't just wake up when they're 50 and are like, I'm just, midlife crisis. I'm going to start murdering people now. Like, they usually, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, so I know there was that one where he was like, they caught him and he was trying to strangle somebody. But you do wonder if he had actually been doing it for, who knows?
Yeah, you said that he moved in 1990.
Yeah.
And these murders didn't really start until like 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's 20 years.
Yeah.
Of like, God knows what he was doing in those 20 years.
Yeah,
Exactly.
if you assume, say, ending his marriage with his wife and leaving the family in the 90s and then coming to Toronto's gay village around that time, and then these particular crimes only really starting in 2010, like you said, that's a lot of time that he was still there. Like, there could be other things that come forward, especially with these cold cases that they're going to reopen. But I mean, at this point, he's been given 8 concurrent life sentences for the 8 convicted first-degree murders. He won't be eligible for parole until he is 91, but it's kind of looking like even that, I mean, might not be a thing. With Canada, it's kind of, I mean, you can have an opinion on it. The highest punishment is like 25 years, and then you get parole. Like, there's no, you can't do life without parole. Like, there has to be.
Right. There has to be.
Yeah, usually it'll be like 25 years if it's a really awful crime, but yeah.
Can they deny parole after 25 years?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so
but
yeah,
you
it
have
comes
to
up
have
and
that
like, no.
option.
Okay, so everyone gets the option. Basically.
Yeah, like in the U.S., you could convict somebody for like life in prison, no possibility of parole. Canada would be, I think, 25 years before you can get parole. Again, it's weird with this one because he's so old. Like, he's an old man doing like a really violent, like physically violent crime.
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder what he was doing when he was younger.
For sure. I bet there's more.
There has to be. It just seems to like clean cut having those like that 7-year sort of reign of terror.
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
Oh, what a piece of trash.
What a piece of trash, yep. So that is the story of Canada's most recent serial killer, Bruce McArthur. A lot of the stuff I got actually was from The Guardian and the BBC, and we'll put all that stuff on our website. Great.
So you can check out our website at murderfriends.com. Send us your email, you can email us with any suggestions, murderfriendspod@gmail.com, and we are getting recommendations. Really appreciate that. It's really helpful when we're looking for stuff to watch, listen to, or to dive into for a True Crime 101. You can follow us on Twitter, MurderFriendsPD, or Instagram, MurderFriendsPod. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.